Chapter 3061, 3061 The Li Clan's Wedding. Chapter 3061, 3061 The Li Clan's Wedding. 3061 The Li Clan's Wedding. Ling Han naturally wouldn't take such a small matter to heart. He also left the city, and followed behind Wang Chuanhe. It wasn't that he couldn't protect this descendant from the city, but he wanted to go to Qianshui town to take a look. He came to the old site of the Wang clan. It had been 3 years since the tragedy. Naturally, the rivers of blood that had flowed there that day had long disappeared. The place had already turned back into a bustling area. However, it was not the Wang clan that occupied this place today, but the Li clan. Ling Han released his divine sense in a scan, and a strange expression couldn't help but appear on his face. What a coincidence it was today. It was the day of Li Jingchu's wedding. Her husband's family had a powerful background, and he was a disciple of a large sect. His name was Luo Guang. Was this Wang Chuanhe's luck attribute at play? The Li clan could have married their daughter a day earlier or a day later, but simply chose to hold the wedding today. Ling Han did not make a move. He was merely tracing the origins of the Wang clan, wanting to know exactly what his descendants had experienced. At this moment, Wang Chuanhe rushed over. Wang Chuanhe had needed 3 years to leave this place in the past. But now, he only used half a day to return. There was no other reason. His cultivation level had soared, and he had advanced from the heavenly body tier to dividing soul tier. How many times had his strength increased? To mention anything else, only severing mundane tiers were capable of flying. Just this point alone was enough to save him a lot of time. He was filled with emotion, and was even more grateful to Ling Han. Without Ling Han, there wouldn't be the current him, so what revenge would there be to talk about? He would definitely be living in a corner somewhere, barely surviving and worrying about the Li clan's pursuit, right? 3 years had passed, and regardless of whether it was his abilities or appearance, he had changed greatly. Previously, he had still been a slightly inexperienced youth, but now he had become a slender young man, and his face had become more mature. Walking on this familiar street, no one actually recognized him as a remnant of the Wang clan. This gave Wang Chuanhe the illusion that he had come to the wrong place. He would go home and take a look first. When he arrived at the old site of the Wang clan, he saw a joyous scene. Who was going to get married? He grabbed a random person and interrogated him. His gaze immediately turned fierce. It was Li Jingchu, a name that he had deliberately suppressed in his heart, but it would flip up from time to bite at his heart. This important accomplice who had caused the deaths and destruction of his clan was actually getting married now? How could she? Wang Chuanhe's expression immediately darkened. Fortunately, he had arrived in time. If it had been delayed until tomorrow, Li Jingchu would have had to leave with her husband after the wedding and head to a large sect to become a disciple of that large sect. He looked up at the plaque on the door, and strode forward. Everything would end today. Sir, your invitation? Someone stopped him. Wang Chuanhe grinned. Why? You don't even recognize me? That person stared at Wang Chuanhe, and felt that this person looked somewhat familiar, but he couldn't recall who it was for a moment. My surname is Wang. Wang Chuanhe added. Wang? That person's heart skipped a beat. In Qianshui town, the surname Wang was a taboo. Ah, you're Wang Chuanhe. He finally remembered, mainly because he had never thought that the only straggler from the Wang clan who had slipped through the net would still dare to appear. What? Wang Chuanhe, the only descendant of the Wang clan? Many people couldn't help but be shocked when they heard this. That young man from the Wang clan had actually returned. However, it had only been 3 years. How could Wang Chuanhe's strength have changed? Wouldn't he just be courting death if he came back? It must be because of Li Jingchu. That's right. When the Wang clan was destroyed, it was during Wang Chuanhe and Li Jingchu's wedding. Unexpectedly, after 3 years, Li Jingchu will get married again. When Wang Chuanhe found out about it, he naturally couldn't hold it in anymore. Sigh, no one would be able to tolerate this. The woman who married him back then destroyed his entire clan. Now, she's actually going to marry another man in the same place. How can this be tolerated? Hush, lower your voice. Do you want to die? Everyone whispered to each other. There was definitely no lack of people from Qianshui town attending the wedding banquet, so they naturally knew about this matter that happened only 3 years ago, not too far back in the past. Besides, the destruction of the Wang clan was an incomparably sensational event for a small place like Qianshui town. It would be mentioned even after 1,000 years passed. Wang Chuanhe strode into the main hall. "Stop right there." The Li clan guards at the entrance tried to stop him, but Wang Chuanhe only released his power lightly. Peng, peng, peng. These guards were sent flying. How could they stop him? Upon seeing this scene, the guests were all greatly shocked. Could it be that Wang Chuanhe had encountered a great opportunity in the past 3 years? They remembered that he had only been in the heavenly body tier back then, and definitely hadn't had such battle prowess. Wang Chuanhe strode forward, and behind him were many injured people who had fallen to the ground. The scene was quite lively. He was naturally very familiar with this place, and quickly arrived at the main hall. Coincidentally, the bride had just been invited out, and was about to bow with the groom. Next, she would be sent to the bridal chamber. Stop! Stop! Of course, the Li clan didn't only have a few guards. More people chased after him, making a commotion. This made the clan leader of the Li clan involuntarily reveal a dissatisfied expression as he looked towards the elders at the side. What kind of day is it today? It was the big day that Li Jingchu was going to be married to Luo Guang, the 7th grandson of the 3rd elder of the Red Flame sect. What kind of force was the Red Flame sect? It was at the Celestial King tier. Jingchu was really a lucky star. 2 years ago, she met Luo Guang by chance, and Luo Guang fell in love with her at first sight, starting a fierce courtship of her. To the Luo clan, they didn't want Luo Guang to marry such a mediocre wife, but who asked Luo Guang to like her? After coaxing and pestering them for 2 years, the Luo clan finally nodded and approved. However, the wedding would only be held in Qianshui town. After returning to the Red Flame sect, the Luo clan would not hold another wedding, because they could not afford to lose face. Marrying such an ordinary woman, and you still wanted a big wedding? What a joke! However, to the Li clan, being able to climb up and get a connection to the Luo clan was already a blessing. This was because the Luo clan had an ascending origin tier ancestor, and the sect master of the Red Flame sect was a celestial king. An elder of the Li clan immediately stood up, and shouted outside, "What is all the noise about?" 4th elder, the surviving member of the Wang clan is here, a guard said breathlessly. What? The big shots of the Li clan were all stunned, and Li Jingchu, who was wearing a red veil, also trembled slightly. The groom beside her immediately sensed it. "Jingchu, I'll take care of everything," Luo Guang said, his eyes full of confidence and disdain. This was only a mere severing mundane tier clan, so it was only natural for them to make a fuss over some small matter. Even though he was only a severing mundane tier, he had countless rare treasures on him. He alone could annihilate a force like the Li clan. Yes. Li Jingchu nodded, and said, "Thank you, Luo Guang. I'm your husband." "Your business is my business," Luo Guang said very gently. Li Jingchu leaned over slowly. "I know. You're good to me. Li clan, I'm here." Wang Chuanhe had already walked into the main hall, and his gaze was fixed on the newly married couple in the red wedding attire. Chapter 3062 Collecting Debts. Chapter 3062 Collecting Debts. 3062 Collecting Debts. Wang Chuanhe, why aren't you hiding in some ravine for the rest of your life? How dare you come here? A young man sneered. Shoo. He jumped out. His name was Li Bing, and he was the only son of an elder of the Li clan. He was already an eternal river tier. He knew that Wang Chuanhe was only a heavenly body tier, so he was naturally happy to jump out at this time. This could be considered as standing up for Li Jingchu. This clan sister of his was not simple. When she entered the Red Flame sect in the future, she would be a disciple of a Celestial King tier sect, and her future would be limitless. Therefore, this favor he had done for her would be very important. Wang Chuanhe glanced at him. A mere eternal river tier was naturally not worthy of his attention. However, all members of the Li clan deserved to die. He clearly remembered that in the battle that day, the Li clan had all been mobilized. This Li Bing's hands were definitely stained with the blood of the Wang family. "How many members of the Wang clan have you killed?" Wang Chuanhe asked balefully. Li Bing guffawed. He wanted to show off a little more, so he didn't make a move immediately. Instead, he counted with his fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 10. I killed them so happily that I didn't have time to count them. Wang Chuanhe nodded. "All right, I'll cut you into 10 pieces before letting you die." "You really think of yourself as someone important," Li Bing said with a cold smile. He charged towards Wang Chuanhe. Just fooling around with such a small fry a bit was enough. He didn't want to make the other clansmen unhappy. Wang Chuanhe stretched out his hand, but he didn't seem to have used any ingenious techniques. However, Li Bing looked like he was possessed as he crashed into Wang Chuanhe, and his neck fell directly into Wang Chuanhe's hand. He was taken down in one move. Wang Chuanhe raised his hand and slashed out a cold light. Then, Li Bing's legs were chopped off. "Ah!" Li Bing screamed. His legs had been cut off, so it was only natural that he was in so much pain that tears flowed out of his eyes. Wang Chuanhe raised his hand and delivered another palm strike. Li Bing lost another part of his body, and this time, it was severed at the knee. However, since both of his legs were already severed, the amount of blood he spat out this time was much less. "Ah!" Li Bing continued to scream miserably. His face was covered in great beads of cold sweat, and he was in so much pain that he was about to faint. However, he remembered what Wang Chuanhe had said earlier, that he had to be cut into 10 pieces before he could die. He couldn't help but feel like his heart was about to explode. "Evil creature, you actually dare to commit murder in my Li clan's territory?" One of the Li clan's big shots finally spoke. He raised his eyebrows and revealed a furious expression. The previous scene had happened too suddenly. Who would have thought that a minor character who was only at heavenly body tier would actually be able to defeat an eternal river tier with a single strike? Could it be that this brat had obtained some sort of fortuitous encounter? Was there someone more powerful behind him? It was precisely because of these thoughts that their reactions were delayed for a moment, so they actually didn't save Li Bing immediately, causing him to suffer again. Wang Chuanhe glanced at the big shot from the Li clan. His gaze was terrifyingly cold, causing the big shot to shiver all over. It was as if the blood in his body was about to freeze. Wang Chuanhe retracted his gaze and waved his hand for the third time. Following Li Bing's scream, his legs had completely disappeared. "How dare you!" The big shot from the Li clan flew into a rage out of humiliation. He was actually frightened by the gaze of a junior. "How embarrassing!" He roared and charged at Wang Chuanhe. He was a severing mundane tier, and he instantly arrived in front of Wang Chuanhe. However, Wang Chuanhe merely lashed out with his leg, and the former was smashed to the ground with a thud. "Fuck." Upon seeing this scene, everyone fell silent. Even Li Bing stopped screaming in pain, and his face was filled with shock. That was a severing mundane tier Grand Elder. Although he was only at the first severance, he had truly stepped into the level of an immortal. In theory, his lifespan was unlimited, and he could live forever. However, Wang Chuanhe's kick had also taken care of him. Hiss, what kind of monster was this Wang Chuanhe? All of a sudden, everyone in the Li clan looked as if they were facing a great enemy. Even Li Jingchu couldn't help but lift her red veil and look at the young man who was emitting killing intent. The entire hall was enveloped by that cold aura. Luo Guang couldn't help but humph. Although this was the Li clan's nemesis, he actually made a scene at his own wedding. This was naturally offending him greatly. "Wang Chuanhe, I've really underestimated you," the clan leader of the Li clan said. He paused for a moment. "Let him go. I promise you that I'll let you leave freely." Clan leader. The clansmen of the Li clan were all unwilling. He came to make a scene, and can actually leave just like that. The clan leader of the Li clan waved his hand, and everyone immediately shut their mouths. In the Li clan, the clan leader possessed absolute authority. Firstly, he was the clan's leader, and secondly, his cultivation level had reached the peak stage of the fourth severance. In the cultivation world, Wasn't the one with the bigger fists the one who spoke louder? Wang Chuanhe laughed loudly, but there was no smile on his face, only endless menace. He stared at the clan leader of the Li clan, and said, 3 years ago, my Wang clan had more than 1,000 people, and they were all slaughtered by your Li clan in a single night. How can such a blood feud be resolved with just a few words from you? The clan leader of the Li clan was not angry. He only said calmly, oh, so you're here to take revenge today? That's right. Wang Chuanhe nodded and looked at Li Jingchu. I still want to see what this B*****''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''ð she poisoned her newlywed husband's entire clan, and now she's wearing a wedding dress and remarrying someone else. How shameless could she be? Wang Chuanhe, don't spout nonsense. Li Jingchu couldn't help but reprimand him. The man beside her was an important disciple of the Red Flame sect. Her future depended on today's marriage. If Luo Guang misunderstood or even in fact despised her, she would be finished. Jingchu, let me. Luo Guang walked out. He was indeed worthy of being the successor of a celestial king tier force. He had a graceful bearing and a demeanor that Wang Chuanhe couldn't compare to. Wang Chuanhe looked at this man with indescribable complex feelings in his heart. Although 3 years had passed, and it had been 10 years for him, he had loved Li Jingchu so deeply back then. How could he let go of such a relationship just like that? The deeper the love, the deeper the hatred, and vice versa. Wang Chuanhe's former lover, the sinner who had caused the destruction of his clan, was actually going to marry another man, and Wang Chuanhe was now facing this man. Naturally, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. However, the past could not be forgotten. Even if Li Jingchu knelt down and begged him, he would definitely not be soft-hearted. This woman didn't love him at all, and even destroyed the Wang clan. From the moment she took this step, the two of them were destined to become strangers to one another. Kneel down and commit suicide. Your death would be easier, Luo Guang said, but he was full of conceit. I can guarantee that this is the right choice for you. Otherwise, you will definitely regret it. Wang Chuanhe shifted his gaze away from him. This was an irrelevant person, and he was here for revenge today. Li clan, I'm here to collect the debt today. Chapter 3063, 3063 Killed with a Single Punch. Chapter 3063, 3063 Killed with a Single Punch. 3063 Killed with a Single Punch. You're courting death. Luo Guang couldn't help but fly into a rage. He was a core disciple of the Red Flame sect, the successor of a mighty celestial king tier force, yet a nobody actually dared to ignore him. Are you very strong? However, looking at how young you are, you're at most a severing mundane tier. I'll consider you a 4th severance, and how many such elites are there in the Red Flame sect? At best, even if you're a dividing soul tier, the Red Flame sect also has countless of them. Wang Chuanhe glanced at him. I have no enmity with you, and I don't want to kill you. But if you continue to be so ungrateful, don't blame me for being ruthless. Luo Guang couldn't help but laugh in anger. Brat, do you know who I am? I'm Luo Guang, the Red Flame sect's Luo Guang. My grandfather is an elder of the Red Flame sect, a great elite of ascending origin tier, and my Red Flame sect's sect master is a 2nd heaven celestial king. If such a background was revealed before Wang Chuanhe met Ling Han, it would definitely give this youth a huge fright. To say nothing of celestial kings, even ascending origin tiers and immortal palace tiers were giants to the Wang clan. They were simply invincible. But now, Wang Chuanhe smiled faintly, and took the initiative to grab Luo Guang. So what if Luo Guang was a member of a celestial king tier sect? Wang Chuanhe would just stretch out his hand and kill him. Do you really want to defy the heavens? Luo Guang sneered as he launched a palm strike at Wang Chuanhe. Peng! As soon as the force behind their respective strikes came into contact, Luo Guang's expression changed. Wang Chuanhe was too strong, far exceeding Luo Guang's limits. Luo Guang didn't dare to hesitate at all, and he immediately took out his treasures. Shoo! A piece of yellow paper floated out. Golden light flickered on the paper, emitting a terrifying might. This was a treasure bestowed upon him by the elders of the Luo clan. It could unleash attacks at the level of dividing soul tier, but it could only be used a limited number of times. It was considered an exhaustible item. As the golden light surged, it transformed into an ancient character that pressed down on Wang Chuanhe. Wang Chuanhe let out a long howl, and met the attack with a punch. Peng! The character immediately crumbled, but Wang Chuanhe also staggered, and took more than 10 steps back. It was considered a draw. Luo Guang was shocked. He had already overestimated his opponent, but he did not expect Wang Chuanhe not to be a fourth severance, but a dividing soul tear. What should I do? Although the talisman in his hand could match the other party, it was an exhaustible item. It could only be used a limited number of times. Once the power of the talisman was exhausted, how could he stop him? At this moment, his forehead was covered in cold sweat. Sir, you have to think carefully about the consequences of going against the Red Flame sect, he said sternly. Wang Chuanhe ignored him. Since they were already facing each other, he would definitely not show mercy. This was something Ling Han had taught him. Once he made a move, he would definitely not leave any future troubles behind. People like this would most likely seek revenge afterward, so he had to kill them. Boom! He threw another punch. Luo Guang had no choice. He could only continue to activate the talisman to block Wang Chuanhe's attack. On the surface, the two of them seemed to be evenly matched. Luo Guang wasn't at a disadvantage. In fact, he was even more relaxed. He only threw out a talisman, appearing to be at ease. Thus, everyone from the Li clan cheered loudly for him. As expected of young Master Luo. Of course, an important disciple of the Red Flame sect is powerful. Pei, what important disciple? He's a core disciple. Yes, yes, yes. Many people began to suck up to him. If they could build a good relationship with Luo Guang and enter the Red Flame sect in the future, wouldn't that be like a fish leaping through the Dragon Gate? However, there were also people with good eyesight who fell in deep thought and shock. How long had it been? 3 years, just 3 years, but Wang Chuanhe's strength had shockingly reached a height that even the Li clan looked up to. Who would believe that Wang Chuanhe had cultivated to this level all by himself? Thus, Wang Chuanhe definitely had a great elite backing him, or even a super powerful force. To be able to nurture Wang Chuanhe in 3 years, just how terrifying was this elite or this force? Just the thought of it was terrifying. The more Wang Chuanhe fought, the fiercer he became. After another dozen punches, the golden light on the talisman began to dim. T. The members of the Li clan could clearly see it, and the cheers and shouts from before had all quieted down, and eventually disappeared. How were they supposed to cheer? They were about to lose. Peng! As expected, after another 3 consecutive punches, the talisman shattered. Wang Chuanhe's killing intent was already blazing as he threw a punch at Luo Guang. Since he had made his move, he would not show any mercy. How dare you? Luo Guang roared. I'm a disciple of the Red Flame sect. If you kill me, it's equivalent to... Peng! Wang Chuanhe's punch had already landed. Under the suppression of the power of dividing soul tear, Luo Guang did not have the ability to retaliate at all, and was immediately blasted into a rain of blood. Everyone was so shocked that they were speechless. Luo Guang died just like that. That was a core disciple of the Red Flame sect. If he died here, Wang Chuanhe would definitely not be able to escape death. However, the Li clan would also be buried with him. It's over, it's all over. The members of the Li clan all glared at Wang Chuanhe with hatred. This was all because of him. He had to have done this on purpose. This guy wanted to drag the Li clan down with him. Wang. The rain of blood that Luo Guang had turned into suddenly glowed, forming a human face. This face was clearly incomparably furious. He stared at Wang Chuanhe. How dare you kill my grandson? I've already killed him. What's the point of spouting such nonsense? Wang Chuanhe said disdainfully. Damn it, I'll come and take your life immediately, the face said. Pa. The image shattered and completely dissipated. Everyone in the Li clan felt lucky. If Wang Chuanhe took the initiative to draw hatred, it might save the Li clan from being implicated. Wang, Quan, he. Li Jingchu said word by word, throwing the red veil aside. The groom was already dead, so how could she get married now? If Luo Guang was dead, she would definitely be the one who was most disappointed. It wasn't because she loved Luo Guang so much, but because Luo Guang was just a stepping stone for her to enter the Red Flame sect. Without Luo Guang pulling the strings for her, how could she be qualified to enter a Celestial King tier sect with her talent? You're so ruthless. She glared at Wang Chuanhe with incomparable hatred. I'm ruthless? Wang Chuanhe sneered. Li Jingchu, how forgetful are you? Don't you remember how my Wang clan died back then? Let me remind you that they died because you poisoned them. So what? Li Jingchu didn't care at all. The Li clan and the Wang clan have been enemies for generations. No amount of unscrupulous means is enough. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame the Wang clan for being too stupid. Wang Chuanhe revealed a sad smile. He hated himself for falling in love with such a vicious woman. Previously, he still hadn't understood why Li Jingchu would have done such a vicious thing. Was there some kind of difficulty that had forced her to do this? This was a sliver of hope that flashed through his mind. But now he knew that he had always been too naive. She had never fallen in love with him. It had all been an act to destroy the Wang clan. Chapter 3064 Arrival. Chapter 3064, 3064 Arrival. 3064 Arrival. A woman like her deserved to die. Wang Chuanhe was about to make his move, but right at this moment, he heard a long howl that sounded like a thunderclap. Pa, pa, pa. Most of the people fell to the ground. Everyone was astounded. Which elite had arrived? The commotion was too great. In the blink of an eye, an old man appeared in the hall. How strange. They had clearly never seen him before, yet everyone felt a sense of familiarity. The elder's face was filled with anger, and he quickly fixed his gaze on Wang Chuanhe. How dare you kill my beloved grandson? Humph, I was just nearby. Do you think you can leave so easily after killing him? Oh. Everyone understood. They hadn't seen this old man before, but they felt a sense of familiarity because this old man was Luo Guang's grandfather, Luo Shouxian. He had previously appeared, his image condensed from multiple light spots. This was an ascending origin tier great elite. Wang Chuanhe remained calm and collected. It was impossible to say that he wasn't afraid. After all, the difference in strength was too great. However, after cultivating with Ling Han for 10 years, he had already learned to be calm. Even if the sky collapsed, he wouldn't be moved. Furthermore, Ling Han had once said that he only needed to be concerned about taking revenge, and that he didn't need to worry about anything else. Did he believe Ling Han's words? Of course Wang Chuanhe believed him. The other party was an existence that even Prince Ma Xian had to address as a lord. Would he lie to Wang Chuanhe? However, under the current circumstances, how could it be that Ling Han could suddenly appear here? Greetings, my lord. Everyone knelt down and bowed to the elder. Luo Shouxian completely ignored them. They were a bunch of trash with the highest level only being severing mundane tier, and they weren't even worthy of a second look from him. Brat, how do you want to die? He said indifferently, but his eyes were filled with hatred. Old geezer, stand aside. A voice suddenly sounded. Everyone was surprised. Hiss, who was this person? Didn't he know who Luo Shouxian was? How dared he call him an old geezer and ask him to stand aside? He was truly audacious. A look of joy instantly appeared on Wang Chuanhe's face. This was Ling Han. It turned out that he had been following him. He couldn't help but feel excited, because he knew what level of existence Ling Han was. Even if he wasn't very clear, he at least knew that he was awesome to the point where even celestial kings had to kneel and pay their respects. How could he not be touched by the fact that such a mighty figure had been protecting him? Luo Shouxian looked over, and he couldn't help but sneer. And who are you? This was just a small severing mundane tier force, so how could there be so many people who didn't know what was good for them? Sigh, this place was too backward. Most likely, everyone thought that severing mundane tiers were the strongest existences, right? Ling Han shook his head. He was just about to slap this fellow to death when he let out a soft cry of surprise and looked into the distance. Boom! Colorful clouds danced in the sky, and a person walked over on a colorful cloud with ribbons of iridescent light wrapped around his body. Prince Ma Xian. When Luo Xiuxian saw this, his expression instantly became solemn. He could look down on everyone here, but in the face of a celestial king, he could only feel fear and trepidation. Xiu. Prince Ma Xian landed. His gaze swept across the area, and although it swept past Ling Han, he turned a blind eye to him. Ling Han had used some sort of trick to make it impossible for anyone else to discover him at all. Nephew, are you all right? His gaze stopped on Wang Chuanhe, his expression looking like a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Fortunately, Wang Chuanhe was fine. As a dignified celestial king, it was naturally impossible for him not to know that an ascending origin tier elite had appeared nearby. Originally, he didn't need to take this to heart. It was normal for someone to pass by or have some matters to attend to. He didn't need to make a fuss. However, the problem was that he was very concerned about Wang Chuanhe. Previously, he had deliberately investigated Wang Chuanhe and learned about the Wang clan. Thus, he could guess that Wang Chuanhe was going to take revenge this time. He was afraid that if something happened to Wang Chuanhe, he would be blamed by Ling Han. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. He immediately rushed over. As expected, his premonition was right. It seemed that Wang Chuanhe was really targeted by this ascending origin tier. I'm fine. Thank you for your concern, Lord Ma. Wang Chuanhe bowed slightly. In Ling Han's eyes, this was already very humble. It had to be known that the Ling clan could casually produce a handful of heavenly venerates, so celestial kings were really nothing. However, in everyone's eyes, it was as if the sky was about to collapse. That was a celestial king, yet he was actually so close to Wang Chuanhe. Now that the truth was out, it was no wonder he became so powerful. It was because there was a celestial king who was nurturing him vigorously. In the hearts of these people, celestial kings were omnipotent. Thus, it was very normal for Wang Chuanhe to completely transform in 3 years. Prince Ma Xian then looked at Luo Xiuxian and frowned. This has nothing to do with you. Leave. He waved a hand. When the same words came out of Ling Han's mouth, Luo Xiuxian would explode in anger. However, when they came out of Prince Ma Xian's mouth, Luo Xiuxian did not dare to get angry at all. He could only feel indignant. He argued, "My lord, this kid killed my grandson. Please let me take revenge." Prince Ma Xian glanced at him with pity, thinking to himself, let's not talk about the fact that he only killed your grandson. Even if it's your own son or father, you have to endure and accept it because you can't afford to offend the person behind him. Of course, as a dignified celestial king, he didn't need to explain anything to an ascending origin tier. He said indifferently, "Do you have any objections to me telling you to leave?" "I wouldn't dare." Luo Xiuxian gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, he said, "I'm an elder of the Red Flame sect, and the sect master of our sect is also a celestial king. Please reconsider the matter on this basis, my lord. Are you using the Red Flame sect to intimidate me?" Prince Ma Xian's expression immediately darkened, and he laughed coldly in his heart. To say nothing of a mere celestial king, so what if a heavenly venerate came? No matter how big the world was, Ling Han was the greatest there was. "Get lost," he reprimanded. Luo Xiuxian had no choice, so he could only turn around and leave. With such low strength, he didn't dare to challenge a celestial king. Seeing Luo Xiuxian run away so dejectedly, everyone was so shocked that their scalps went numb. For the sake of Wang Chuanhe, Prince Ma Xian was actually willing to offend a celestial king tier force. How doting was he towards Wang Chuanhe? Li Jingchu felt even more regretful. If she had been firm in her beliefs and stayed by Wang Chuanhe's side back then, with Prince Ma Xian's attitude towards Wang Chuanhe, it would have been a piece of cake for him to take her in as his personal disciple, right? And now, Luo Guang was dead. Everything was over. No, Luo Guang was dead, but Wang Chuanhe was still alive. He was deeply favored by a celestial king. Her eyes flickered. At this moment, she had to make an extremely important decision. In an instant, she made up her mind. "Chuanhe, help me." She stretched out her hand towards Wang Chuanhe. "Actually, I was forced. I love you so deeply, how could I betray you? But I had no choice. The clan threatened me with my mother's life. If I didn't listen to their orders, my mother would be killed by them. This time, the clan threatened me with my mother's life and forced me to marry Luo Guang. Chuanhe, save me, save my mother. Chapter 3065, 3065 Illegitimate Son? Chapter 3065, 3065 Illegitimate Son? 3065 Illegitimate Son? Even Ling Han was slightly surprised. This woman could actually act so shamelessly. Was it really necessary to stoop so low in order to ride on a celestial king's coattail? However, he didn't lose his temper, and he simply observed the situation quietly. If Wang Chuanhe showed indecisiveness, and if he showed this kind of woman undeserved sympathy, then Ling Han wouldn't have the time nor effort to give this descendant much help. He would simply help him get to the 9th heaven before letting him be. Li Jingchu, the members of the Li clan roared. They were filled with fury. They could understand the fact that she wanted to live. However, she couldn't push all the blame onto them. Kill them, Chuanhe, kill them. Li Jingchu shouted. A sinister expression flashed across her pretty face, ruining her beauty. There was savageness on her face as she yelled, kill them all, and then I'll be able to leave with you. We can live together and care for each other forever. She put on a pitiful expression, and continued, Chuanhe, didn't you always want to marry me? I'll accept your proposal today. Wang Chuanhe remained silent. After a while, he shook his head, and said, do you take me for a 3-year-old child? Or perhaps you think I'm still the foolish youth from 3 years ago? He paused for a moment before spitting with soaring killing intent. I've come here to exact revenge today. Those who have the blood of my Wang clan on their hands, don't even think of escaping. Li Jingchu, as one of the main culprits, even dying 100 times is not enough to repent for your sins. Li Jingchu's imposing aura instantly deflated like a balloon. She didn't dare to challenge the furious Wang Chuanhe, and she could only put on an even more pitiful expression as she said, Wang Chuanhe, just forgive me once, okay? I'll definitely serve you well in the future. Revolting. Wang Chuanhe said coldly. Shua, shua, shua. With a few swings of his blade, Li Bing was immediately cut into a dozen pieces. Those at the Eternal River tier had powerful life forces, so Li Bing didn't die right away even though he had been reduced to such a miserable state. The severed pieces of his body continued to squirm, and it was as if they were worms wriggling on the ground. This was a bloody and terrifying scene. Wang Chuanhe lashed out again, grabbing another member of the Li clan, and asking in a baleful voice, how many members of the Wang clan did you kill? The person in his hand was so terrified that he directly suffered a mental breakdown, with his eyes rolling into his head and a warm liquid running down his legs. I won't grant you such an easy death. Wang Chuanhe sneered as he restricted the person's cultivation and tossed them aside. Run, the clan leader of the Li clan shouted. Everyone, go in different directions. Even though this ungrateful brat is extremely powerful, there's only one of him, after all. He won't be able to catch us all. The members of the Li clan immediately started to flee in different directions. However, they quickly discovered that they couldn't run out of this hall no matter what. Meanwhile, those outside the hall couldn't run outside the courtyard, and those outside the courtyard couldn't run out of the town. What in the world was going on? Was this also that ungrateful brat Wang Chuanhe's doing? Wang Chuanhe turned to Prince Ma Xian and clasped his hands in respect, saying, thank you for the help, Lord. Indeed, he wasn't powerful enough to unleash such an ability yet. However, celestial kings could use such abilities with ease. Prince Ma Xian nodded with a smile, and said, it's no trouble at all. They were done for, they were truly done for. Even a celestial king had become involved, so not even a dog from the Li clan would be able to make it out of this place alive today. Otherwise, that would be a great humiliation for the celestial king involved. Thus, the Li clan was definitely beyond saving. They were as dead as could be. Wang Chuanhe resolutely lashed out, killing anyone who had participated in the battle 3 years ago. He would cut them into as many pieces as the number of people they had killed. This was genuinely cruel and merciless. He started killing the more unimportant members of the Li clan first, and it was only natural that he would leave the clan leader and Li Jingchu for the last. Only this way could he maximize the elation he felt from exacting revenge. Ling Han shook his head slightly upon seeing this. He had never experienced the excruciating pain of having his clan massacred before. Even though the Wang clan was descended from his bloodline, they were already many generations down, and he had never met them before, either. Thus, even though he felt furious, he couldn't feel anywhere near as wrathful as Wang Chuanhe. To Ling Han, these people were his descendants in name only. To Wang Chuanhe, however, these people were his family who he lived with and cared about, so how could their feelings be compared? Ling Han could understand Wang Chuanhe's thirst for revenge. However, he still felt like Wang Chuanhe was taking things a little too far. Perhaps there had always been a beast hidden in this young man's heart, and following the destruction of the Wang clan, this beast was finally set free and allowed to engulf Wang Chuanhe's true nature. Or perhaps this was his nature to begin with. Ling Han decided that he had to give his descendant a few lessons. Otherwise, this brat would eventually go mad one day. Inside the hall, all of the members of the Li clan had already collapsed to the ground, helpless and in despair. Faced with such a situation, what else could they do but wait for death? Only Li Jingchu remained stubborn and unwilling to give up. She stood there and spoke by herself, recounting all of her encounters and interactions with Wang Chuanhe, attempting to sway him. Wang. A powerful aura suddenly crashed over, directly shattering the defensive barrier that Prince Ma Xian had erected. Immediately afterward, a person abruptly appeared in the hall. However, one's surprise would immediately turn into understanding when they saw the two ribbons of iridescent light around his body. It was only natural that he could enter with such ease. Because he was a second heaven celestial king. The celestial king clasped his hands and greeted, "Brother Ma." Prince Ma Xian also looked over. He furrowed his brows slightly and asked in an uncertain voice, "Brother Shu?" The Red Flame sect's sect leader, Shu Fei? That's right, the second heaven celestial king said with a loud laugh. Prince Ma Xian's heart skipped a beat. However, his expression remained calm as he asked, "For what purpose has Brother Shu come?" "Come on, Brother Ma, this is quite cold of you," Shu Fei said with a shake of his head. "What did you just do to an elder from my sect? Did you forget already?" A glimmer of hope appeared in the eyes of the collapsed members of the Li clan. In fact, even Li Jingchu shut her mouth and stopped speaking. The situation was potentially changing. "Oh, won't you look at my terrible memory," Prince Ma Xian said with a chuckle. "So that's what Brother Shu has come for. However, I don't recall ever wounding an elder from your esteemed sect." "Indeed," Shu Fei replied with a nod. "However, Elder Luo's grandson died a miserable death because of this. As the sect leader of the Red Flame sect, it naturally wouldn't make sense for me to ignore this. Brother Ma, please hand the culprit over. I'll invite you over for a drink in a few days, and we can chat to our heart's content then." Prince Ma Xian spread his hands and said, "Culprit? What culprit? I don't know what you're talking about." "Him. It's him." The members of the Li clan surprisingly started to roar. They all pointed at Wang Chuanhe. This was their only sliver of hope right now, so they were willing to ignore even the threat from Prince Ma Xian. Li Jingchu took things even further, sobbing, "Lord Celestial King, I just got married to Luo Guang, yet after laying eyes on my beauty, this depraved beast actually dared to unleash violence on my wedding day. Please deliver justice, Lord Celestial King." Tears streamed down her face, and she appeared as delicate and pitiable as could be. However, would Shu Fei be moved because of this? Thinking so would be looking down on celestial kings. Meanwhile, Prince Ma Xian frowned at what he saw. He hadn't imagined that these people would be able to muster such courage when granted a sliver of hope. They actually dared to utter such words before him. There was a faint smile on Shu Fei's face as he quietly looked at Prince Ma Xian. Prince Ma Xian contemplated things for a moment before saying, "This young man is of great importance, so it's best that Brother Shu stays out of this." "Oh, perhaps his brother Ma's illegitimate son then?" Shu Fei chuckled. Chapter 3066, 3066 Manifesting Spiritual Qi. Chapter 3066, 3066 Manifesting Spiritual Qi. 3066 Manifesting Spiritual Qi. Pa. Xu Fei was immediately slapped across the face. This was a crisp and loud slap that immediately caused the color to drain from his face. This was naturally a painful slap. More important than this, however, was the fact that he didn't even know who had slapped him. Just thinking about this caused a cold chill to run down his spine. Which lord has come? Please forgive me for not welcoming you, Xu Fei said. He didn't dare to shout in anger, and he instead lowered his voice in a subservient manner. Prince Ma Xian's heart jolted in shock as well. Perhaps it's him, he thought to himself. This slap was to punish your toxic tongue. Do you have any complaints? Ling Han asked. Ling Han initially didn't want to interfere. However, who told Xu Fei to accuse Wang Chuanhe of being Prince Ma Xian's illegitimate son? To carelessly change someone's ancestry like this. Was this not asking for a slap? Xu Fei felt like crying at this moment. He had merely said this in jest, yet he had somehow managed to draw great calamity upon himself. He wailed in grief in his mind, yet he didn't dare to let his emotions show on his face. Instead, his expression became solemn as he said, "Yes, you were correct to punish me. I'll definitely keep this lesson in mind." "All right, off you go then," Ling Han said. However, Xu Fei wasn't willing to give up so easily. "Lord, may I have the honor of seeing your appearance?" Pa. He was immediately slapped across the face again. Prince Ma Xian chuckled coldly when he saw this. Even though he couldn't see Ling Han, either, he had already guessed the identity of this mysterious person. Just how freakishly powerful is Ling Han? Him speaking to you is already giving you enough face, yet you still want him to show himself, he said in his mind. What a joke. He's a heavenly venerate. Xu Fei finally gave up all thought of resistance after suffering this blow. He had already been prepared this time, yet he had still been mysteriously slapped by that person. It was abundantly clear that the person was more powerful than him, far more powerful than him. He couldn't provoke this person. He bowed to the sky before turning around to leave. He would leave this troubled place forever and never return again. Wang Chuanhe also retracted his gaze. He knew that the mysterious person was definitely Ling Han. After all, only Ling Han was capable of wielding such magnificent power. He continued to slaughter the members of the Li clan, interrogating them before hacking them into pieces. When he came across those who hadn't participated in the battle at that time, he would simply cripple their cultivation before tossing them aside. He would spare their life. Yet, in this world, was this not the same as being killed? Ungrateful brat, your cruelty today will destine you to death by someone else's hand one day, the clan leader of the Li clan roared. At this moment, only he and Li Jingchu were still alive. You need to die 100 times, Wang Chuanhe said coldly. He started to carefully dice the clan leader into small pieces. Even Prince Ma Xian couldn't help but find this cruel. Killing someone was as simple as separating their head from their body. Wang Chuanhe was taking things too far. However, Ling Han was nearby, so how would he dare to interfere? Li Jingchu wet herself in fright, with her pretty face becoming deathly pale. The clan leader suffered a truly agonizing fate, with his body diced into 100 pieces, not one piece more, and not one piece less. However, his cultivation meant that he wouldn't die straight away, and he could only suffer in unbearable pain as his blood flowed across the ground. This was a truly horrifying sight. Prince Ma Xian had already turned his head around to avoid looking at this. If Ling Han weren't present, he would leave even if didn't stop Wang Chuanhe. Now, however, he could only tolerate his disgust as he stood there. In reality, even Ling Han was frowning slightly as he observed the situation. Perhaps he had genuinely raised a demon? After the clan leader of the Li clan drew his final breath, Wang Chuanhe turned around to look at Li Jingchu. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. Li Jingchu shrieked as she prostrated on the ground and furiously kowtowed. Her hair disheveled and she looked much like a lunatic as she begged, Chuanhe, I'm willing to do anything for you. I don't ask to be your wife, and I can even be your maid or woman. Pu. She immediately fell silent. This was because a sword had directly pierced through her mind. Wang Chuanhe sheathed his blade, a complicated expression on his face. He had already exacted revenge, so why wasn't he feeling any joy at all? "Let's go," Ling Han said as he walked over. He grabbed Wang Chuanhe and directly opened a fissure in the void, stepping in and traveling through the dimensions. "Respectful farewell, my lord," Prince Ma Xian said respectfully the moment before the spatial fissure closed. Only heavenly venerates were capable of opening fissures in the void. Those below the heavenly venerable tier could only open fissures in space, but not fissures in the barriers around the dimensions. Several months later, Ling Han returned to the profound negative realm with Wang Chuanhe. Here, he truthfully explained the origins of the Wang clan to him. "Greetings, old ancestor," Wang Chuanhe said as he fell to his knees. He respectfully bowed and paid his respects to Ling Han. Ling Han sighed, and asked, "Do you blame me?" "I wouldn't dare," Wang Chuanhe replied, with his head still lowered. He said that he didn't dare, not that he didn't. Ling Han waved his hand, and said, "From today onward, you can change your name to Ling Chuanhe. Ancestor, without the blessing of my parents, Chuanhe wouldn't dare to change his surname." Wang Chuanhe was unexpectedly stubborn. The knot in his heart was extremely tight. Ling Han thought for a moment before saying, "All right, suit yourself then." He couldn't continue to spend time and effort on this descendant forever. After returning to the ancestral grounds of the Ling clan, he would ask Ling Zhenxue to deal with this matter. Meanwhile, he would enter seclusion. He had obtained another secret code of life, and he still had yet to fully digest it. This time, he spent a lengthy 300 million years in seclusion. Tiny wisps of spiritual qi appeared on each of Ling Han's dimensions. Spiritual qi. This was the foundation of cultivation and the root of cultivator's power. There were some powerful beings who would be at the Celestial King tier the moment that they were born. Thus, they could skip the process of refining spiritual qi and directly start accumulating source power. To most beings, however, spiritual qi was the foundation of their cultivation. A look of delight appeared on Ling Han's face. The manifestation of spiritual qi in his dimensions meant that they would instantly start to advance several times quicker than before. He performed some calculations, and he found that he only needed around 10 billion years to elevate all of his dimensions into high-tier high-level dimensions. This was simply astounding. At that time, he would perhaps be powerful enough to rival or even suppress hysteria. Moreover, he would only be at the 6th tier. Being able to suppress hysteria, the most powerful enemy and the most powerful being in the world, while only at the 6th tier. Who could believe this? The secret code of life can be viewed as the key to opening the door to the 8th type of power. This secret code also has a strong affinity with the power of dimension, so after obtaining it, I've technically already advanced to the 7th tier. It's just that I haven't actually obtained the 6th fundamental particle yet. 10 billion years. Give me another 10 billion years, and hysteria will no longer be able to act with such wantonness. Even if Ling Han still couldn't kill hysteria at that time, he would at least be able to suppress it comprehensively. He could then slowly cultivate to the 7th tier. When he succeeded, could anyone still remain undying and indestructible before him? But where did this spiritual qi come from? At the end of the day, they still needed a source of power. Ling Han continued to cultivate in seclusion, and he became increasingly interested in the origins of spiritual qi. As he deduced the heavenly venerable seals, he continued to ponder the origin of spiritual qi. Doing two things at once indeed affected his efficiency. However, it wasn't by very much. Another 400 million years passed, and Ling Han finally made a discovery. Chapter 3067, 3067 Facing Hysteria Head-On. Chapter 3067, 3067 Facing Hysteria Head-On. 3067 Facing Hysteria Head-On. Where did spiritual qi come from? The answer to this question was surprisingly simple: the void, and fundamental power. The dimensions would interact with the void, extracting fundamental power and accumulating it in their cores. The dimensions would then channel this power, and as if becoming alive, they would eject this power in another form, spiritual qi. Thus, even though fundamental power and spiritual qi were different, there was indeed some relationship between them. Everything is related to the void and intimately related to the boundless power in the void. In this sense, the unique powers of the dimensions can also be viewed as belonging to fundamental power. They've simply undergone a transformation in the dimensions. That being the case, the eighth type of power is still fundamentally a power of dimension and a fundamental power. It's just that it's countless times more powerful. My body can be viewed as a Genesis world, so will that allow me to create another void? After all, this is the origin of all power. Or can I perhaps accommodate the void directly? Ling Han was slightly stunned by his own delusional ideas. Even hysteria only dared to engulf the Genesis world, and not the void. The void was far too large, and no being had ever been able to reach the edges of this plane. It wouldn't be surprising even if 1,000 or 10,000 Genesis worlds existed in the void. Forget about this. I should focus my effort on elevating the dimensions in my body to high-tier high-level dimensions. Only by doing this will I possess the power to genuinely rival hysteria. I also need to find extermination as well. She's still in possession of a secret code of life. However, obtaining this secret code of life will be useless if I don't have enough dimensions in my body. Ling Han exited seclusion once to check on the cultivation of his friends and relatives. Those who had advanced to the heavenly venerable tier before made almost no progress. The higher one's cultivation level, the longer it would take one to make any progress. Of course, this was unless they came across some rare opportunity. Meanwhile, the boundless resources provided to the Ling clan enabled the new emergence of tens of thousands of celestial kings. Right now, the Ling clan could completely be regarded as the number one clan in the world. Even the established clans of the 7th tier elites couldn't compare to it. However, the members of the Ling clan still kept a relatively low profile because of the threat from extermination. "Where's Wang Chuanhe?" Ling Han asked. "That brat," Ling Zhenxue said with a strange expression. "His fortune is truly unimaginable. His cultivation talent is clearly nothing special, yet he's somehow able to encounter rare opportunities one after another. After all these years, he's already advanced to the heavenly venerable tier." Even Ling Han was astonished. Compared to his children and his grandchildren, he honestly hadn't put too much effort into raising Wang Chuanhe. Yet, Wang Chuanhe was still able to become a heavenly venerate. This was truly remarkable. Even though Ling Han could kill a 6th tier elite with a single finger now, he was still unable to help a 9th heaven celestial king advance to the heavenly venerable tier. This was something beyond the regulations, something that pertained to fundamental power. Wang Chuanhe's cultivation talent was nothing special, and in order to let him exact revenge as soon as possible, Ling Han further hadn't attempted to stabilize his cultivation foundations. That being the case, it should have been difficult for him to even become a celestial king, so how had he suddenly become a heavenly venerate? Was he truly this fortunate? Ling Han frowned, and said, "That brat has vicious tendencies, and he might even blame us for his clan being massacred. Keep an eye on him, and don't let him cause any trouble." "All right, I understand," Ling Zhenxue replied with a nod. Ling Han continued to cultivate in seclusion. Another 5 billion years passed, and he had already managed to deduce all of the 4th grade and 3rd grade heavenly venerable seals. This allowed his cultivation speed to increase by countless folds again. "Most of my dimensions have already been elevated to high-tier high-level dimensions, and I'm countless times more powerful than when I last battled against hysteria. And add to that the explosive power of the 3rd grade heavenly venerable seals, and I should be powerful enough to rival hysteria now. Let me take a look at the realm battlefield first. I need to make sure that Shatter Mountains and the others are working hard. In addition to that, I also want to find out about extermination's current situation." Ling Han exited seclusion, and headed toward the realm battlefield. He went to the secondary battlefield first, and after so many years, the mother trees had naturally recovered their numbers already. They gave birth to a relentless enemy army, leading to huge casualties for the defenses. Ling Han directly charged into Hysteria's realm, and wantonly destroyed everything in his path. Only after doing this did he casually leave and enter the main battlefield. To his disappointment, however, Chong Yang and the others had already fled. Not only had the 5 of them fled, But even Golden Silk Moth and 10,000 Shadows were nowhere to be seen. Only Lin Luo and the 6 other heavenly venerates remained to painfully defend against the enemy invasion. However, Hysteria was far too powerful, and a simple swing of its tentacle would immediately send the heavenly venerates flying. They were almost completely unable to slow down Hysteria's advance. The main battlefield was rapidly falling to enemy advance. If this continued, the main battlefield would only be able to hold on for a maximum of a few billion more years. After that, the profound negative realm would become a scrumptious meal for Hysteria. Ling Han released a battle cry before charging over and swinging his fists. Whoosh! He was extremely quick, and he transformed into a streak of light as he charged at Hysteria. Boom! A terrifying shock wave blasted into the surroundings as his fist collided with Hysteria. Peng! 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 Lin Luo and the others were sent flying back like puppets. Fortunately, the bodies of 7th-tier elites were indestructible, so they didn't suffer any wounds. Ling Han, they exclaimed in unison. What did they just see? Ling Han had swung a fist and forcefully blocked one of Hysteria's attacks. Gasp! There was someone in the world who could actually rival Hysteria. Even more unfathomable than this was the fact that Ling Han was only at the 6th tier. 6th tier. Good heavens! Just how devastatingly powerful would he become when he advanced to the 7th tier? However, Ling Han knew that the biggest benefit of him advancing to the 7th tier would be his body becoming indestructible and him gaining the ability to raise the dimensions in his body to the transcendent level. As for strength, in reality, he wouldn't become much more powerful in the short term. This was because the greatest source of his power was the powers of dimension, something that wouldn't rise in level simply because he advanced to the 7th tier. Instead, this was something that he needed to spend a long time cultivating and nurturing. Thank you for all your hard work, seniors, Ling Han said. He was radiating with an indomitable spirit as he continued, from today onward, we'll turn defense into offense and drive Hysteria out from this realm. If it had been someone else saying this, their words would have been treated as nothing more than a joke. Now, however, Ling Han's incredible feat of blocking Hysteria's attack gave them no option but to trust him. He had the right to utter such words. Charge! The heavenly venerates roared with renewed vigor. They had defended this place for so many years, and at long last, they had finally waited until the arrival of someone who could turn the tables. Ling Han! Hysteria shrieked using its high-pitched spiritual waves. It was filled with rage and regret. After failing to kill Ling Han last time, it understood that it had lost its final chance to wipe this person from the face of the world. Sure enough, Ling Han was charging over again, and he was now powerful enough to face it head-on. Hysteria, the era belonging to you has already come to an end, Ling Han bellowed as he unleashed another powerful attack. The 7 ultimate elites assisted him from the sidelines. Even though they were far weaker than Hysteria, they were still 7th-tier elites, after all, so they could ultimately still provide a little help. In any case, they were indestructible and undying, so they could completely be used as human punching bags. Chapter 3068, 3068 A stunning turn of events. Chapter 3068, 3068 A stunning turn of events. 3068 A stunning turn of events. Boom, boom, boom. Ling Han was undoubtedly the main force in the battle against Hysteria. Piss off, he roared as his body lit up. He channeled all of his 3rd-grade heavenly venerable seals, causing his power to increase 6,000-fold. Even Hysteria was unable to withstand his furious attack, and its tentacle was forcefully sent flying. When Ling Han finished unleashing his explosive power, Hysteria had already been pushed back 350,000 kilometers. The 7 ultimate elites were all beside themselves with excitement. After fighting Hysteria for so many years, it had only ever been them who had been forced to retreat by Hysteria. They had never once managed to hold their ground. But now, they were pushing Hysteria back. This was the first time in history. This caused them to shake with excitement, so much so that even their heads went numb. 7th-tier heavenly venerates were also people. They also had emotions. Ling Han channeled his 4th-grade heavenly venerable seals. Even though his power increase fell down to only 5,000-fold, this was still enough for him to ferociously charge forward and continuously force Hysteria back. This time, Hysteria was forced to retread 250,000 kilometers. Ling Han then channeled his 5th grade Heavenly Venerable Seals. The combination seals all started to circulate together, smashing into Hysteria and forcing it to retreat more than 1 million kilometers. This was a stunning feat, a historical feat. After unleashing his explosive power, Ling Han stood still and asked in a calm voice, "Still want to continue?" Hysteria waved its tentacles around. Its situation was unique, and the fact that it had transformed into a dimension allowed it to become far more powerful than normal. However, this also caused it to lose some abilities, such as channeling Heavenly Venerable Seals. Before today, this hadn't been an issue at all. One could only channel Heavenly Venerable Seals for a limited amount of time, and it further took a great deal of time for one to recharge the energy of the seals. Meanwhile, Hysteria possessed a crushing advantage over the 7th-tier Heavenly Venerates, so it didn't matter even if it couldn't channel Heavenly Venerable Seals. Now, however, Ling Han's raw power was already able to rival it. That being the case, it became extremely critical whether it could channel Heavenly Venerable Seals or not. If this continued, it would be pushed back time and time again, all the way until it was forced from the two-realm battlefield. At that time, it would be Ling Han who charged into its dimension, preventing it from waging another war against the transcendent dimension. Impossible. You can't be this powerful. Hysteria roared in a booming voice. Unless you obtained the secret of the world. Secret of the world? Secret code of life. Ling Han's heart jolted. The world's core was most likely a non-existent mana. This was something that extermination had made up to trick him, Chong Yang, and the others. Now, however, Hysteria was mentioning some secret of the world. Ling Han's unfathomable power came from the ball of light in his mind. Theoretically speaking, this was a secret that could never be discovered. One could never discover the ball of light in their own mind. In fact, one could only discover it if they managed to resonate with another person. In other words, it was essentially impossible. However, due to a string of coincidences, Ling Han had indeed discovered this secret and unlocked this ability. Yes, that's definitely the case. Hysteria exclaimed, its emotions fluctuating and agitated. Who would have thought? After planning for countless years, it was actually snatched away by you first. Is this so-called secret of the world the mysterious ball of light in one's mind? Ling Han asked. That's right. This ball of light contains the secret of the Genesis world's origin, and obtaining it will allow me to charge through the barrier and leap out of this small pond, Hysteria replied. Lin Luo and the others couldn't help but feel astonished upon hearing this. Leap out of this small pond? What did this mean? What lies beyond this small pond? Ling Han asked. He recalled the time when Hysteria had disdainfully called him a frog at the bottom of a well. This caused his mind to wander, and he speculated whether more Genesis worlds lay in the void. Now that Hysteria was actively mentioning it, Ling Han naturally had to seize the opportunity to ask. Otherwise, it would be much harder to extract this information from Hysteria when it eventually calmed down. Perhaps it's a bigger world, or perhaps it's a vast expanse of void, Hysteria replied. Even Hysteria doesn't know. Ling Han smiled, and asked, You're willing to destroy the Genesis world for the sake of this unknown? So what if I am? Hysteria replied unsympathetically. Since I know there's a chance for a more spectacular world to lie beyond this small pond, why would I want to be trapped in this place forever? Even if it's nothing more than a dark cage, how can I be willing to give up if I don't at least take a look for myself? Ling Han fully understood the situation now. Hysteria was naturally engulfing the dimensions to increase its own power. At the same time, however, it was also aiming to engulf those who had a ball of light in their minds. Once Hysteria engulfed these beings, the secrets that were contained inside the balls of light would also be obtained by it. After so many years, it was very likely that Hysteria had already obtained some secret codes of life. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to create 6th-tier monsters. However, Hysteria also had its own limitations. After transforming into a dimension, its base power was indeed much higher than anyone else. However, this also restricted it from creating any more dimensions. Instead, it could only continue to strengthen its own dimension. Qualitatively speaking, this kind of growth was superior to that of anything else. However, Ling Han could completely rely on an advantage in quantity to suppress or even surpass this. Hysteria was unable to rival Ling Han even after toiling for so many years. This was only normal. After all, becoming a dimension had indeed strengthened Hysteria. At the same time, however, it had also placed a pair of shackles on it, preventing it from moving around as it pleased. Meanwhile, Ling Han was truly blessed by fortune, first encountering Wally and then taking in a disciple who was similar to himself. This allowed him to finally discover the secrets of his own body, secrets that should have never been revealed. Everyone should have curiosity in their minds. However, I can't allow countless people to die simply to satisfy your thirst for an answer to your curiosity, Ling Han announced. He dashed forward and started to pummel Hysteria again. In the past, he had always been suppressed and pushed back by Hysteria. This had caused him to be filled with frustration. Now, it was finally his turn to return the favor. He ferociously launched an attack. However, without the explosive power of the heavenly venerable seals, he was in fact unable to suppress Hysteria. Even with the help of Lin Luo and the others, he was only able to reach a stalemate with Hysteria. After all, Hysteria was far too powerful. Every once in a while, however, when the heavenly venerable seals finished recharging, Ling Han would be able to unleash explosive power and forcefully push Hysteria back. Even though this was a slow process, Lin Luo and the other ultimate elites were still filled with uncontrollable excitement. This was because if this continued, there would eventually come a day when Hysteria was finally ejected from the profound negative realm. At that time, they would only need to stand guard at the entrance and never need to worry about Hysteria invading them again. In the midst of their intense battle, Ling Han, Lin Luo, and the others suddenly felt several powerful auras rapidly dashing over. In the next moment, Chong Yang and the 4 other ultimate elites from the previous era appeared before them. Beside them were 10,000 shadows and the other 7th-tier heavenly venerates. Had they come over to provide help now that victory was within reach? Were they doing this to leave a good name for themselves in the history books? They were truly skilled at taking advantage of the situation. However, before they could even finish these thoughts, they saw the 7 ultimate elites furiously charge over, their targets being Lin Luo and the others. Peng, peng, peng. This was a completely unexpected turn of events, and Lin Luo and the others were immediately sent flying after being caught off guard. Fortunately, those at the 7th tier were indestructible and undying. Thus, they were uninjured even though they were sent flying. Chong Yang, Golden Silk Moth, have you two gone crazy? Xin Fu roared in a harsh voice. What in the world were they doing? Were they helping Hysteria? Chong Yang and the others didn't answer. Instead, they continued to unleash attacks to draw the attention of Lin Luo and the others. However, Ling Han was the main force among them, so Hysteria would have no option but to retreat as long as he continued to unleash the might of his heavenly venerable seals. This would remain the case even with the additional annoyance of Chong Yang and the others. Boom! A supremely powerful aura swept over them, after which a slender and elegant figure materialized. It was as if they had strode over from the ancient past, and they brought with them a devastating power as they launched a strike at Ling Han. Extermination. Chapter 3069, 3069 Two enemies joining forces. Chapter 3069, 3069 Two enemies joining forces. 3069 Two enemies joining forces. The true body of extermination, the being who had obliterated the Genesis world of the previous era. Now, some unknown persons will had taken control of this body and unleashed a devastating power. This was a power far beyond the peak stage of the 7th tier. In fact, this was a power that could almost rival Hysteria's. Whoosh! Hysteria also launched an attack at the same time, swinging a tentacle at Ling Han. Ling Han threw a fist to meet their attacks. Boom! His body shuddered, and he retreated 1,500 kilometers. However, Hysteria and extermination didn't fare any better, with Hysteria's tentacles sent flying and extermination also sent soaring through the air. What's going on? The two beasts are actually joining forces. Ling Han proudly stood in the sky and peered down at Hysteria and extermination. He then stared at extermination and asked, "The seven of them were coaxed here by you?" Extermination also stood in the sky, with her clothes fluttering in the gusts of energy. She was breathtakingly beautiful. So what if they were? And so what if they weren't? She retorted. Ling Han shook his head and remarked, "I'm truly becoming more and more confused. You people are actually trying to protect Hysteria? What, have you all gone stupid as well?" Extermination looked at Ling Han and said disdainfully, "It's impossible to have a meaningful conversation with someone as ignorant as yourself." Ling Han roared with laughter and replied, "I can suppress 7th tier elites while at the 6th tier, so do you have any right to look down on me? Where is your courage coming from? Do you really think you can stop me? I can already rival you now, so it's only a matter of a few billion years before I can suppress all of you with a single hand. You might be growing more powerful, but are we not also growing more powerful?" Extermination sneered. Indeed, extermination had been equally as powerful as Ling Han back then, and she was still equally as powerful as him now, even though he had already advanced in leaps and bounds. Perhaps extermination's speed of advance could truly catch up to Ling Han's. "By the looks of it, you obtained many secrets from me at that time," Ling Han said. During his time in the central region of the Genesis world of the last era, he had been invaded by the world's will. Even though this had given him the ability to develop new dimensions, it was now clear that many of his secrets had been exposed to his opponent as well. Theoretically speaking, extermination shouldn't have been able to replicate his footsteps even after learning of his secrets. This was because he had completed all of his foundations while still at the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Yet, extermination had surprisingly managed to grow stronger at an incredible pace. Hang on. As long as one obtains the ability to develop new dimensions, they'll be able to slowly manifest new dimensions even if they only started off with one. Given enough time, won't they also be able to reach the same level as the Genesis world? And just how powerful was extermination to begin with? However, she most likely hadn't transformed into a dimension, so how was she able to suppress 7th tier ultimate elites as well? Perhaps she had also followed the same path as Ling Han, and gathered the power of countless dimensions while still at the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier? And this had allowed her to manifest the embryo of a Genesis world in her body. Perhaps her abilities hadn't been as insane as Ling Han's back then, and she had only possessed 100 or 200 dimensions. After obtaining the secret of nurturing new dimensions from Ling Han, however, a new door to power had been opened up for her. "It's a shame that I wasn't able to obtain all of your secrets," Extermination said with a sigh. "Otherwise, would I have left you alive until today?" Ling Han finally understood why the World's Will had told him to join forces with Extermination at that time. It had said that this was the only way for them to defeat Hysteria. In reality, it was trying to convince Ling Han to reveal his hidden secrets to Extermination. However, Extermination had been forced to compete with Ling Han for the sake of the secret codes of life, and this had allowed Ling Han to discover some clues and guess the true identity of the World's Will. It was none other than Extermination herself. Otherwise, Ling Han still had yet to reach the 5th tier at that time, and it would have been useless even if he had reached the 5th tier. He would have been completely unable to rival Extermination, even after taking into account his ability to travel through dimensions. It was extremely likely that Extermination could have seized an opportunity to kill him. After all, Extermination was far more powerful than Chongyang and the others. "What's this got to do with Hysteria?" Ling Han asked. "Why should I tell you?" Extermination replied coldly. Whoosh! Hysteria swung a tentacle and charged over. Even though it was confused as to why its predecessor was helping it, was there any reason not to take advantage of this situation? "I'll stop him. You do what you have to do," Extermination said as she engaged in an intense battle with Ling Han. She was truly no weaker than Ling Han. Not only was her power immense, but she could even channel heavenly venerable seals. She was much like a second Ling Han, one that could entirely rival him. Everyone with a battle prowess at the 7th tier was engaged now, meaning that there was no one left to stop Hysteria. Boom! Hysteria seized this opportunity to counterattack, furiously attacking cities and engulfing land. In just a day's time, it reclaimed all of the lands that it had lost to Ling Han. With no 7th-tier ultimate elite to stop him, it continued to charge forward at an increasing speed. Ling Han ignored Extermination and charged at Hysteria. However, Extermination immediately caught up to him again. The two of them were at a similar power level, so neither of them could easily run away from the other. Just Extermination alone was able to stop Ling Han. Of course, the inverse was also true, and Ling Han could also stop Extermination. In any case, the prerequisite to all this was the fact that Hysteria was powerful enough. Otherwise, if it were someone like Chong Yang, Ling Han could send them flying to heaven knew where with a single strike. Hysteria was indeed slightly affected by Ling Han's attacks. However, this was still nowhere enough to stop its advance. Ling Han, abandon your futile struggles and welcome the arrival of a glorious age, Extermination said. Her battle with Ling Han was genuinely meaningless. He couldn't wound her, and she couldn't wound him, either. Neither of them was able to gain an advantage over the other. Thus, Extermination was clearly unwilling to engage in this battle any longer. Even if she wanted to kill Ling Han, it wouldn't be right now. Humph. Allowing Hysteria to engulf the Genesis world is your so-called glorious age. Ling Han retorted coldly. Have you forgotten what I told you before? Extermination asked with a proud voice. The 8th type of power is antithesis. After comprehensive destruction, what will follow is a flourishing world filled with even more life and vitality. What kind of new life will the destruction of the Genesis world bring? Ling Han questioned calmly. Such pathetic sympathy. Extermination scoffed in a cold voice. After reaching our level, is there still any need to care about those ants? Ling Han, we can join forces to break out of this small pond. No need. Ling Han replied in rejection. Then drown in the furious tides of time, Extermination said. She continued to engage with Ling Han, preventing him from charging over to obstruct Hysteria. The other ultimate elites were also fighting with each other, and this was yet another similarly meaningless battle. None of them suffered any wounds, and none of them were even shedding a single drop of blood. Only Hysteria continued to furiously advance. Ling Han furrowed his brows. With Extermination and the others stopping them, they would have no way of breaking free to stop Hysteria. What could they do? Leave, he suddenly exclaimed, using his divine sense to deliver this message. If this continued, the end result could only be them looking on helplessly as Hysteria engulfed the Genesis world bit by bit. If they left now, however, Ling Han would at least still have the opportunity to cultivate and grow stronger. Chapter 3070, 3070 Retreat. Chapter 3070, 3070 Retreat. 3070 Retreat. Ling Han and the 7 ultimate elites retreated. Extermination and the others didn't give chase. They were all at the 7th tier, and they were all indestructible and undying, so what difference would it make even if they caught up? They simply needed to guarantee that Hysteria could continue to advance. When Ling Han and the others retreated from the main battlefield, the elites fighting on the secondary battlefield also flew over. They had no option but to do so. Following the fall of the main battlefield, Hysteria continued to charge forward and move onto the secondary battlefield. Thus, how could these ordinary heavenly venerates stop the charge of a transcendent dimension? They naturally had no option but to retreat. The last time they had performed a full-scale retreat was when Hysteria had triggered a devastating storm of energy. Now, less than one epoch later, they were forced to perform another full-scale retreat. Just what was going on? Hadn't Ling Han joined the battle already? Why were they still being forced to retreat? Lin Luo revealed the reason, and this instantly caused deep astonishment and puzzlement to appear on everyone's faces. What was Extermination trying to do? In any case, it was somewhat understandable that Extermination was joining forces with Hysteria. After all, one of them was the past life, and one of them was the present life. Extermination's body had developed a new consciousness, and it wouldn't be surprising if this new consciousness had been affected by her old one. However, what had gotten into Chongyang and the others? They had come from the Genesis world of the last era, so they clearly understood the fundamental nature of extermination and hysteria. That being the case, why were they still willing to join forces with them? No one was able to understand this. In the end, they could only explain it by saying that Chongyang and the others had been bewitched. The problem was, they were indestructible and undying 7th-tier heavenly venerates, so how could they possibly be bewitched? Retreat first. Linghan commanded. There was already no way to turn the tables now, especially since there were two supreme 7th-tier ultimate elites on Hysteria's side. Meanwhile, he was the only one on their side. In terms of ordinary 7th-tier ultimate elites, both sides had the same number. That being the case, how could they possibly block Hysteria? This was unless more 7th-tier elites rushed over to help them. Even then, they would only be able to slow Hysteria down by a little. Everyone fell back in retreat. Judging by the situation, it was inevitable that Hysteria would engulf the profound negative realm. How quickly it did so was entirely dependent on how quickly it could engulf things. And after Hysteria engulfed this transcendent dimension, how would Linghan still be able to block it? They needed to pack their things and make some necessary preparations. That way, they would be able to immediately retreat when they were faced with insurmountable danger again. Linghan parted ways with Lin Luo and the others. They all had their own families, so they naturally needed to find a safe place for them first. Only after this could they discuss their next steps. They needed to decide whether they would defend the profound negative realm or retreat to the next realm. Linghan mulled over this as he walked. The first question was why Chongyang and the others had defected to Hysteria. Since 7th-tier elites were indestructible and undying, this naturally couldn't be because they were afraid of death. Instead, Hysteria had definitely promised them some benefits. However, what benefits could they receive from doing this? The answer most likely lay in the world's core that extermination had made up. Linghan didn't believe it, but this didn't mean that Chongyang and the others didn't believe it. They had most likely been told that they could advance to the 8th tier after obtaining the world's core. In addition to this, they had probably been enticed by the idea of breaking out of this small pond as well. These 7th-tier elites, people standing at the pinnacle of the world, were presumably very attracted to this idea. This was especially the case since they had already battled against extermination for so long before this. Would they not feel exhausted both physically and mentally after all this time? After arriving in this new Genesis world, they no longer had any friends or family to take care of or share time with. There was nothing for them to feel attached to. At the same time, many 7th-tier elites also viewed all matter beneath them as nothing more than mere ants. That being the case, it was no surprise that they joined forces with Hysteria. Perhaps there was one additional reason on top of all this. That was, they had suffered great humiliation at the hands of Linghan, so they wanted to borrow Hysteria's power to exact revenge. Forget about it. These 7 people were only minor characters in the scheme of things, so it wasn't important why they had decided to defect to Hysteria. When the time came, Linghan would simply suppress them with a single hand. The most critical factor was extermination. What was her true identity? After obtaining the secret of manifesting new dimensions from him, her battle prowess had been allowed to grow to a terrifying level. Moreover, she was intent on jumping out of this so-called small pond. Hang on. Linghan's eyes suddenly lit up. If extermination is genuinely the same as me, then her being at the 7th tier should allow her to elevate a dimension to the transcendent level as well. At that time, she would possess enough power to suppress me. However, this didn't happen. Extermination is at the 7th tier, and she's also someone who's lived for heaven knows how many years. Being as freakish as she is, she most likely possesses no fewer heavenly venerable seals than me, either. She was further in possession of a group of dimensions before, so her cultivation speed is definitely no lower than mine as well. So, she's in possession of a transcendent dimension, yet she was still only able to rival me, but not surpass me. What does this signify? She definitely possesses fewer dimensions than me. In other words, she didn't obtain the ability to manifest new dimensions, The glimmer in Ling Han's eyes grew brighter and brighter. If his speculation was correct, then Extermination's ability to rival him was because she possessed a transcendent dimension inside her. In other words, she had a qualitative advantage over him. However, once Ling Han advanced to the 7th tier, he would also be able to raise a dimension inside him to the transcendent level. Or he could choose to raise more dimensions into high-tier high-level dimensions. In any case, he could definitely regain his advantage. This is definitely the case. Otherwise, it will genuinely be impossible to stop hysteria. He returned to his ancestral grounds, and those under the heavenly venerable tier were all drawn into the celestial guest residence by him. This was a heavenly venerate tool, and the space inside it was so large that it could rival a low-level dimension. As for the Empress, Hu Niu, the karmic life heavenly venerable, and the others, they all sat around Ling Han as they listened to him explain the situation. They were heavenly venerates, so it wouldn't be too difficult for them to flee and stay alive as long as they didn't directly challenge hysteria or experience the comprehensive collapse of the Genesis world. What? They were shocked and petrified by what Ling Han told them. If news of this got out, it would definitely cause immense commotion to sweep throughout the entire Genesis world. It would cause everyone to freeze with fear, feeling as if doomsday were about to arrive. The karmic life heavenly venerable frowned, and asked, "Why are they doing this?" "This isn't important anymore," Yi replied. "The most important thing is how we can stop these bastards." Everyone nodded in agreement. What would it matter even if they understood the reason behind Chong Yang and the others' betrayal? Could that change the current situation? Ling Han pondered for a moment, and said, "I'll discuss this with Lin Luo and the others first. In fact, I've already drawn all of my clan members into the celestial guest residence already, so you guys may as well come along with me as well." Before coming here, he had already agreed with Lin Luo and the others to meet up at the ancestral grounds of the Lin clan after dealing with his personal matters. Even though there was no one left to obstruct hysteria, it was a dimension, after all, so it could only engulf the land bit by bit. Thus, the profound negative realm was safe for the moment. However, this period of safety might only last for 1 billion years. Or perhaps it would even be as short as 100 million years. Ling Han led the others to the Lin clan. Xin Fu and Bai Fan had already arrived, and Ju Heng and Chu Hao were naturally present as well since they were Lin Luo's disciples, and their ancestral grounds were also right next to each other's. They were only waiting on Wu Jihong and Blood Rainbow. After waiting for a dozen or so days, the two remaining 7th-tier heavenly venerates finally arrived. The 8 most powerful men in the world sat down, surrounded by their disciples and descendants, all of them heavenly venerates. They quietly listened to the discussion of the 8 ultimate elites. "In light of our current situation, what suggestions does everyone have?" Lin Luo asked. He was the owner of this ancestral ground, so he was naturally playing host to this meeting as well. "Those bastards!" Bai Fan cursed as he slammed the table. His formidable aura seeped out, causing the heavenly venerates in the surroundings to become pale. They felt agonizing pain on their skin, and it was as if they were about to explode. Chapter 3071 Discussion. Chapter 3071, 3071 Discussion. 3071 Discussion. Chong Yang and the 4 others are from the Genesis world of the last era. After their world collapsed, and after slumbering for so many years, it's understandable that their way of thinking has changed, though this doesn't make them any more deserving of forgiveness. However, 10,000 shadows and golden silk moth? Humph. There was an intense look in Blood Rainbow's eyes, and his body was brimming with killing intent. 10,000 shadows was only able to advance to the 7th tier thanks to the core fragments that we gave him, yet he's actually chosen to betray us now? Unforgivable. Xin Fu also spat with anger and ferocity in his eyes. They were so furious that they wanted to kill someone. However, this wish was nothing more than a pipe dream. 7th tier elites were undying, and this was the case even though 10,000 shadows and golden silk moth had only just advanced to this tier, and were far weaker than the others. Lin Luo waved his hand, and said, "Since this has already become reality, talking about it anymore won't be of any help to us. What we need now is a plan to deal with the situation. This is the last transcendent dimension in the Genesis world, so we definitely have to defend it no matter the cost. Otherwise, everything will be done for, Wu Zhihong opined. Ling Han shook his head, and said, we won't be able to defend it. Blood Rainbow frowned, and said, don't ruin our morale. It's the truth, Ling Han replied. He had dared to challenge 7th tier elites while still at the 5th tier, so he was naturally even more unafraid of 7th tier elites now. However, they were all on the same side, so his attitude was naturally more amiable. If we exclude Hysteria, the number of 7th tier elites in the enemy camp is coincidentally equal to ours. Moreover, their battle prowess is also very similar to ours. So, if we decide to battle them one-on-one, there'll obviously be no one left to stop Hysteria. The ultimate elites all fell silent. Speaking boldly was easy, but they couldn't choose to ignore this grim reality. Xin Fu turned to Ling Han, and asked, then what do you suggest we do? Ling Han pondered for a brief moment before replying, 1. Wait, and 2. Retreat. What did this mean? Everyone looked at Ling Han. They had no option but to admit that he had already become the backbone of the Genesis world. It's impossible for us to defend the profound negative realm, Ling Han explained. Since that's the case, our best option is to wait. We'll wait until Hysteria engulfs this dimension, and we'll pull the chestnut out of the fire at that time. We'll snatch the core of the dimension from under its nose. If we succeed, then Brother Xin, Brother Wu, Brother Bai, and Miss Lin will all have an opportunity to advance to the 7th tier. If they become 7th tier elites, then they'll also become indestructible, even if their battle prowess doesn't increase immediately. In any case, that will give them the right to face Hysteria. Even if it's only 4 of them, they'll at least be able to slow Hysteria down a little. In addition to this, we can continue to retreat, all the way to a low-level dimension. We'll allow Hysteria to engulf all the other dimensions. This will buy us more time. Ling Han paused for a moment before continuing, I still have a lot of room for improvement. I haven't even reached the peak stage of the 6th tier yet. The so-called peak stage of the 6th tier that he talked about wasn't referring to the 5 fundamental powers inside him reaching a consummate level. Instead, he was referring to the dimensions inside him elevating to a higher level. Everyone grimaced upon hearing this. Ling Han's battle prowess had been growing at a breakneck pace. From initially struggling to suppress an elite at the peak stage of the 7th tier, he had advanced to being able to suppress 5 ultimate elites by himself. A short while ago, he had even been able to rival Hysteria and force it to retreat. All of this was done by a 6th tier elite. With such incredible feats to his name, it wouldn't be surprising even if someone claimed that he was a 7th tier or 8th tier elite. However, he actually had yet to reach the peak stage of the 6th tier. Just how astonishing was this? Ling Han looked at everyone, and said, we can get a move on now. Relocate everyone in the medium-level dimensions and try to move them all to the low-level dimensions. In fact, we can directly move everyone to the celestial realm that sits at the very end. We'll engage in a final battle with Hysteria there. This was far too bold and decisive, no? Retreating to the very end, to a place with no more room for retreat in a single step. How resolute. The 7 ultimate elites exchanged glances before falling deep in thought. If they retreated to the celestial realm, they would genuinely have nowhere left to retreat after that. They wouldn't even have the power to blow up the Genesis world to drag Hysteria down with them. That's impossible now, Ling Han said with a shake of his head. Since Hysteria has already fallen victim to this before, it definitely won't fall victim to it a second time. Everyone was disappointed upon hearing this. However, the 7 ultimate elites slowly nodded in agreement. They wouldn't fall at the same hurdle twice, either, so it was only natural that Hysteria was the same. In fact, Hysteria had potentially transformed into a dimension to avoid being attacked upon the destruction of the Genesis world. Its dimension was far too large, so it was indeed possible for it to avoid this calamity if it hid itself in some corner of the dimension. Very well. I accept your proposal, Lin Luo said, becoming the first ultimate elite to nod his head in approval. I also accept it, Zhu Heng said with a nod. Accepted, Chu Hao said, becoming the third person to vote. Xin Fu and the three others hesitated for a brief moment before eventually nodding slowly. Since Ling Han could still grow stronger, they might as well go all in on him. Since we've come to a consensus, let's get a move on now. Don't waste any time, Lin Luo said. They didn't ask anyone else for their opinion. If one weren't at the 7th tier, one wouldn't have the right to discuss these things with the ultimate elites. 7th tier heavenly venerates were gods among the heavenly venerates. Ling Han traveled through the dimensions and relocated all the important people to the celestial realm first. He couldn't help but feel slightly emotional after returning to this familiar place. After traveling to so many places, was he ultimately going to resolve everything here? The other heavenly venerates naturally received news of the situation as well, so they all started to relocate to the celestial realm with their clans and families. To put it simply, everyone was trying their best to relocate as many people as they could. These were all living and feeling beings, so it was only natural that they wanted to save as many of them as possible. These people were all seeds of hope for the future. After resolving this potential worry, Ling Han entered seclusion and started to cultivate. The most important thing right now was his battle prowess. If he could wield a crushing power superior to that of his enemies, then he could naturally resolve all of the problems that they faced. Before entering seclusion, there was one matter that caused him to become slightly distracted. Wang Chuanhe had disappeared. Ling Han couldn't find him no matter what, and it was as if he had simply vanished from the face of the world. It was as if he had never existed in the first place. However, he was a powerful heavenly venerate who was more than capable of protecting himself, and he was also a shockingly fortunate person who always came across rare opportunities. Thus, he most likely wouldn't face any danger. Ling Han pondered this for a short moment before waving away his worries for this descendant. He officially entered seclusion. He aroused all of the heavenly venerable seals inside him, and used them to interact with the void, extracting a vast amount of fundamental power to temper his body. Meanwhile, his dimensions also started to develop with vigor, actively drawing energy from the void by themselves. They then transformed this energy into nutrients that could help them grow. Since these dimensions contained life force now, would it be possible for him to place living beings inside? Ling Han was contemplating the worst-case scenario where they failed to stop hysteria. At that time, he would transform himself into a Genesis world to hold all living beings. Let's hope we never reach that stage. With this in mind, Ling Han decided to give it a test. He drew the Empress and the others into a dimension in his cell. The result was a success. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief. This meant that as long as he remained alive and undestroyed, those he cared about would also be able to stay safe forever. He focused his attention on cultivation. It was already a foregone conclusion that the profound negative realm would be destroyed by hysteria. That being the case, they definitely had to snatch the core of the dimension, as this would allow them to nurture several more 7th-tier elites. Moreover, this might also allow Ling Han to elevate his cultivation and reach the peak stage of the 6th tier. Time. What he needed was time. Time flew by, and 600 million years passed in the blink of an eye. One day, Ling Han received news that the profound negative realm had almost completely been engulfed by hysteria already. The core of the dimension was about to appear. Time to set off. Ling Han, Lin Luo, and the other 7th-tier heavenly venerates arrived at the profound negative realm. Right now, this transcendent dimension was already unable to live up to its name. It was so small that it could only compare to a small city. Chapter 3072, 3072 Fight for the Core. Chapter 3072, 3072 Fight for the Core. 3072 Fight for the Core. Only 8 people were part of the team that traveled to the profound negative realm. There was Ling Han, Lin Luo, and the 6 other ultimate elites. Others wouldn't be of any help even if they tagged along. Apart from hysteria, their enemy was fully made up of 7th-tier ultimate elites such as Chong Yang and the others. These people were far too powerful. Nothing more needed to be said about extermination, while Chong Yang and the others had obtained the dimensions that once belonged to Feng Wuding. This allowed their battle prowess to increase by a significant amount. Someone with a battle prowess under the 7th tier participating in this battle would be nothing more than seeking death. Sure enough, you people came, Extermination remarked as she proudly stood in the sky. Gusts of energy blew past, causing her sleeves to billow in the air and her raven hair to flutter in the wind. This caused her skin to appear even whiter and more delicate. She was a stunning beauty, yet she was also someone who could dictate the fate of the Genesis world of 2 separate eras. "We're not allowed to come," Ling Han retorted calmly. "It's meaningless even if you do come," Extermination replied in a similarly calm and nonchalant voice. It was as if she weren't worried about Ling Han at all. It was difficult to say whether this reflected her true feelings, but it at the very least gave her an advantage in terms of aura. Ling Han smiled, and asked, "And just who do you think you are? It's meaningless just because you say so. We have to scurry back home just because you told us to. Since you've already come, there's no need to think about going home anymore. I'll suppress all of you here today," Extermination announced, with her raven hair fluttering in the wind. There was an indescribable beauty about her at this moment. She looked at Ling Han, and continued in a baleful voice, "As for you, I'll slowly grind away your cultivation before extracting all of your secret hair." In your dreams, Ling Han snickered. The core of the dimension had yet to appear, and the ultimate elites on both sides were also undying people who were unable to kill each other. Thus, they didn't engage in battle right away. Instead, they threw insults at each other in an attempt to decrease their enemies' morale. Ling Han exchanged barbs with Extermination, while Lin Luo and the others exchanged barbs with Chong Yang and the other traitors. 10,000 shadows, I'll definitely slice open your chest to see what color your heart is, Bai Fan shouted as he glowered at 10,000 shadows. His face was filled with fury. He was a short-tempered person, and he detested ungrateful bastards like 10,000 shadows the most. 10,000 shadows naturally paid no heed to this. He had already advanced to the 7th tier, so why would he still care about any of this? He simply needed to act as he pleased. He didn't need to care about what others thought of him. He was indestructible and undying, so what could they do about him? Bai Fan, once I obtain the core of the dimension and advance to the peak stage of the 7th tier, just see how I dispose of you, he threatened calmly. Because of the length of time he had cultivated, his cultivation was indeed inferior to Bai Fan's right now. However, this wouldn't be the case once he advanced to the peak stage of the 7th tier. Perhaps there would still be a small difference in power between different heavenly venerates at the peak stage of the 7th tier. However, this difference definitely wouldn't be very big. The betrayal of Chong Yang and the others greatly angered Lin Luo and the other ultimate elites. Now that they were face to face again, their boiling anger naturally simmered to the fore. Initially, Ling Han's explosive increase in power had already allowed him to rival Hysteria and even push it back. In other words, he had already been powerful enough to eliminate the calamitous danger that Hysteria posed. Yet, the interference of Extermination as well as Chong Yang and the others had thrown a spanner in the works, and instead caused the situation to become even direr. How could they not be furious? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Hysteria also appeared, brandishing its 9 tentacles and causing immense pressure to descend upon Ling Han and the others. The core of the dimension had yet to appear, yet everyone had already become tense and ready to explode at any moment. Wang. A column of brilliant light materialized, radiating with 18 different colors. The core of the dimension had appeared. Whoosh. Hysteria was the first to move, with its tentacles shooting toward the core of the dimension. However, Ling Han immediately moved as well, throwing a punch and forcefully pushing Hysteria back. Lin Luo, Chong Yang, and the others also started to move, giving rise to a chaotic battle. Ling Han, with me present, you won't be able to achieve anything, Extermination said as she dashed over. Her hands were like a heaven-splitting axe as they slashed down at Ling Han. Humph. Piss off. Ling Han roared as he replied with a destructive punch. Peng. Extermination was immediately sent flying. What? Extermination exclaimed in shock. Ling Han's power was actually growing even faster than hers. Even though the difference wasn't big, He was indeed slightly more powerful than her now. She sighed in her mind. She had transformed into the world's will before, and she had pretended to help Ling Han obtain 2 new abilities. In reality, however, she had been secretly stealing his secrets. However, she had only learned how to elevate dimensions to the transcendent level, and she had failed to learn how to manifest new dimensions. There were a total of 10,000 dimensions inside her, and this was already a remarkable and terrifying number. At that time, all of these dimensions had further been high-tier high-level dimensions, equivalent to the power of 100,000 6th-tier elites. However, following the destruction of her previous body, all of these dimensions had suffered significant damage, with most of them directly collapsing. Meanwhile, the remaining ones were all severely damaged. This was also one of the main reasons why Hysteria had abandoned its old body and decided to start anew. Even though extermination was still domineering, there were only a few hundred dimensions remaining in her body. It was only because she had raised a few of them to the transcendent level that she was able to become so freakishly powerful. However, it was far too difficult to raise dimensions to the transcendent level. Moreover, she hadn't obtained as many secret codes of life as Ling Han, so this further caused the speed of her advance to slightly lag behind Ling Han's. Even though it was only by a tiny bit, this was still enough to give Ling Han an upper hand. Ling Han unleashed a battle cry as he unleashed increasingly ferocious attacks. Myriad transformations returned to one. Extermination cried as she made a pushing motion with her jade-like palms. A chaotic burst of energy that was filled with disorder and turmoil attempted to refine the entire world into one. Ling Han humphed coldly and unleashed a furious punch at her. Who cared what techniques she used? He would crush them with absolute power. He was brimming with confidence and self-belief. Peng! Extermination was sent flying again. The difference in power between them was only minuscule, yet in a battle between ultimate elites, this minuscule difference was often extremely critical and decisive. Hysteria charged over to join forces with extermination and battle Ling Han. Ling Han was unafraid, and he unleashed another battle cry as he faced off against the 2 most powerful enemies in the world. He appeared extremely lively as he fought against them. Lin Luo and the others all watched on with emotion. Thank heavens they had resolutely defended Ling Han in the past. Otherwise, following Chong Yang and the others' betrayal, they would be powerless to do anything but be suppressed. They wouldn't have any hope of turning the tables. The 2 sides continued to battle. However, Hysteria and Extermination were both incredibly vicious beings who were only slightly weaker than Ling Han, so after joining forces, they slowly started to gain the upper hand. After obtaining more dimensions, Chong Yang and the other traitors were also more powerful, and Lin Luo and the others now. Ling Han and his companions were suffering a full-scale disadvantage. What could they do? Ling Han bellowed and unleashed his full power as he charged at the core of the dimension. Now wasn't the time to engage in a life-or-death battle with Hysteria and the others. The core of the dimension was the most important thing. However, Hysteria and Extermination naturally wouldn't allow Ling Han to snatch the core of the dimension so easily. They both charged after him, unleashing a barrage of attacks as they did so. The 3 supremely powerful beings continued to unleash furious attacks at each other as they fought for the core of the dimension. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Meanwhile, the core of the dimension continued to whiz around in the air. The profound negative realm had yet to fully die, so it was as if the core of the dimension were a living person who was unwilling to be obtained by anyone. Peng! The 3 Paragon elites exchanged another blow, unleashing a shock wave so powerful that the core of the dimension was instantly shattered into pieces. Wang! The shards of the core exploded in different directions. Hysteria and Extermination attempted to grab them, yet Ling Han suddenly unleashed an explosive roar, after which boundless radiance started to shine from his body. His power increased by a whopping 8,000-fold. First-grade seals. Chapter 3073, 3073 Secret of the World. Chapter 3073, 3073 Secret of the World. 3073 Secret of the World. Ling Han hadn't just been cultivating for the past few 100 million years. He had also deduced all of the first-grade seals at the same time. He had skipped over the second-grade seals, and directly focused on deducing the first-grade seals instead. This was in order to maximize his battle prowess. However, he had never channeled these seals before, and this was because it would have been meaningless to do so. What would it have helped him even if he had suppressed hysteria and extermination and pummeled them into the ground? They were undying and indestructible beings, after all. Now that he was at a critical stage of fighting for the core of the dimension, however, he no longer needed to hold back anymore. Boom! Ling Han glowed with brilliance as his power increased 8,000-fold, and even the pumping of his blood was so loud that it was as if heaven and earth were shattering into pieces. He threw a single punch, and it was as if all other actions descended into stillness, with only his fist continuing to tear through the air and illuminate the sky. Peng, peng. What did it matter that his opponent was hysteria? What did it matter that his opponent was extermination? They were powerless in the face of such an explosive attack, and they had no option but to be sent flying back. Ling Han then charged toward Chong Yang and the others, sending them flying into the distance as well. This freed up Lin Luo and the others, and allowed them to dash around to gather the core fragments of the dimension. Ling Han. Extermination howled in fury. In just an instant, more than half of the core fragments had already been collected by Lin Luo and the others. She was seething with rage, yet she didn't charge forward to attack Ling Han again. Instead, she dashed toward the core fragments of the dimension. Piss off, she roared, throwing a palm strike, and instantly blasting Xin Fu into the distance. This was an inevitable result as the gulf in power between them was far too great. She reached over again, and she quickly obtained a piece of the core fragment of the dimension. Elsewhere, hysteria was also forcefully pushing its opponents aside, allowing it to obtain a piece of the core fragment. They were two of the most powerful beings in the world, after all, and apart from Ling Han, there was no one else who could rival their might. Ling Han looked around, and he saw that all of the core fragments had already been collected, with most of them falling into the hands of his allies. Seeing this, he roared, "Leave!" Lin Luo and the others left without any hesitation. They had come here with the goal of obtaining the core of the dimension, so since the core fragments had already been collected, what was the point of staying any longer? With Ling Han bringing up the rear, the 7 ultimate elites quickly retreated together. After Lin Luo and the others left, Ling Han stood guard at the 2-realm passageway, and said calmly, "The next time we meet, only one party will make it out alive." Extermination and hysteria stopped attacking him. Hysteria was unable to pursue Ling Han into different dimensions, while extermination alone was slightly weaker than Ling Han. That being the case, why would she pursue him alone? To ask for a beating? Me. Who doesn't know how to speak boldly and boast? Regarding who will die at that time, you'll naturally find out soon, extermination said coldly. Ling Han turned around and left, paying no more heed to her. After returning to the celestial realm, Lin Luo and the others divided up the core fragments of the dimension. These were naturally given to Lin Yolian, Wu Haoyang, and the others. If they could advance to the 7th tier, they would naturally have a huge influence on the situation. Ling Han also received a few pieces of core fragments. He was the main force in the fight against hysteria and extermination, so having him increase his strength was naturally the most important. He thought for a moment and decided against immediately using these core fragments. Instead, he stowed them away. There was still a little bit of time left, so he wanted to rely on his own efforts to reach the peak stage of the 6th tier. At that time, he would then use these core fragments to help him advance to the 7th tier. Of course, the chance of success was incredibly low. After all, even a complete core of the dimension might not be enough to help him advance to the 7th tier. Ling Han composed himself and pushed all other thoughts out of his mind. Right now, what he had to do was cultivate and grow stronger. This was the key to resolving everything. Lin Yolian, Xin Chihu, and the others were also cultivating in seclusion, and refining the core fragments of the dimension. Even if they were capable of advancing to the 7th tier, this wouldn't be any time soon. Instead, it would take them hundreds of millions of years. Lin Luo and the others had nothing to do, so they traveled to the front lines, and attempted to obstruct Hysteria's advance. That way, they could buy some time for Ling Han and the others. However, Chong Yang and the others were no pushovers, so Lin Luo and the others were unable to give Hysteria any trouble. Following the fall of the profound negative realm, there were no more transcendent dimensions in Hysteria's path. In fact, there weren't even any high-level dimensions in its path. Thus, the speed at which Hysteria engulfed these dimensions soared explosively, and it only needed a short 1 million years to engulf an entire dimension. Not only that, but the more dimensions Hysteria engulfed, the greater its speed would become. A few 100,000 years per dimension, 100,000 or so years for a dimension. When all of the medium-level dimensions were engulfed, Hysteria only needed tens of thousands of years to engulf an entire dimension. Fortunately, all of the heavenly venerates under the 7th tier were helping relocate the living beings of these dimensions. However, just how large was a dimension? There was only a limited number of heavenly venerates, so only less than 1% of living beings were actually moved to the celestial realm. 5 billion years later, Ling Han finally exited seclusion. He had already raised all of the dimensions inside him to high-tier high-level dimensions. Limited by his current cultivation level, this was already the highest he could raise them. He couldn't raise them to the transcendent level. At this moment, Bai Mifen, Lin Yolian, and the others also exited seclusion. Withstanding the huge pressure of expectations on them, they all successfully advanced to the 7th tier. Once they stabilized their cultivation, they would become extremely important helpers to Ling Han. Ling Han once again gathered Ning Haishin and the others, people who had a ball of light in their minds. Now that he had grown stronger, perhaps he would be able to discover more of the hidden secrets in these balls of light in their minds. This pertained to the secret origin of the Genesis world. This was the most valuable information in the world. They entered resonance using the balls of light in their minds again. Boom! Tumultuous waves crashed through their minds, causing Ning Haishin and the others to immediately lose consciousness. However, Ling Han was able to withstand this shock wave. In that short instant, he was able to observe many secrets. Why did Ning Haishin possess a powerful sense of affinity? Why was Ma Chenggao's divine sense so powerful? Why was Anfeiyue so skilled at comprehending formations? And why had Ling Han been so skilled in alchemy? He had been unreasonably skilled in alchemy. He could master any pill recipe immediately after learning it, and he could even create new pill recipes out of thin air. This was the secret code of the entire Genesis world. Before obtaining it, the secret codes of life had only been one part of the equation. Of course, they had been the most important part of the equation. Everything else could only be regarded as icing on the cake. Huge transformations started to take place inside Ling Han's body. Golden lotuses bloomed in his mind, with his comprehensions becoming as radiant as flowers. The secret codes of life that Ling Han had obtained all hovered to the surface. There were still some sections missing, yet these missing sections were automatically completing themselves at this moment, allowing the secret codes of life to form a ring. Ling Han could sense that he was resonating with people similar to him very far away. Moreover, he was resonating with more than one person. Extermination and Wang Chuanhe. It was as if they had all been linked together, through space and time, and were capable of drawing out the fundamental nature of the world. Ling Han wasn't sure whether extermination had seen these secret codes of life or not. However, he felt like that short instant was far too little time for her to do so. He had been fully prepared, yet he had still almost missed the opportunity to observe them. Meanwhile, extermination had been completely unprepared. As such, it was unlikely that she had seen these secret codes of life. Ling Han digested this ring of secret codes, and he felt like his body was now undergoing some sort of mysterious transformation. However, he was unable to describe what this transformation was. Time quietly crept by, and another 900 million years passed just like that. Ling Han was forcefully awakened from his seclusion. This was inevitable as Hysteria had already advanced to the foreign realm. Once the foreign realm fell, the celestial realm would be next. If Hysteria engulfed these final two dimensions, then it would succeed in its goal to engulf the entire Genesis world. Chapter 3074 3074 Heavenly Venerable Seals, complete. Chapter 3074 3074 Heavenly Venerable Seals, complete. 3074 Heavenly Venerable Seals, complete. The final battle was about to begin. Ling Han made some final preparations, doing his best to move as many people as he could into the dimensions inside him. The small celestial realm was already exploding with people. There were countless dimensions inside Ling Han, and they were all high-level dimensions that were capable of hosting 6th-tier heavenly venerates. Including the Empress, Hu Niu, and the others, Ling Han decided to move all of them into his body. In this sense, no one could compare to Ling Han. Take Lin Luo, Zhu Heng, and the others, for example. They also had 1 or 2 dimensions inside them, and these dimensions had also been cultivated into high-tier high-level dimensions. However, they were unable to host life. Without a secret code of life, how could they possibly manifest life? Thus, only Ling Han was capable of doing this. Perhaps extermination was capable of it too, since she had also obtained some secret codes of life. It was just that she hadn't obtained as many as Ling Han. A while later, everyone under the 7th tier had already been moved into Ling Han's body. It was as if he had transformed into a Genesis world. In the outside world, only a measly few 7th-tier ultimate elites remained. They included Lin Luo, Xin Fu, Wu Jihong, Bai Fan, and Blood Rainbow, the 5 experienced 7th-tier heavenly venerates. In addition to them, there were also Zhu Heng, Chu Hao, Lin Yolian, Wu Haoyang, Xin Chihu, and Bai Mifen, the 6 newly advanced 7th-tier heavenly venerates. All up, there were 11 7th-tier heavenly venerates present. Including Ling Han, this was their final formation in the ultimate battle against Hysteria. The foreign realm was falling at a rapid pace. After engulfing almost all of the Genesis world, Hysteria had already become incredibly powerful at this moment. It was advancing at an insane speed, using only a measly 300 years to engulf the entire foreign realm. This was nothing more than a low-level dimension, so it was already unable to raise Hysteria's power by much. However, engulfing the entire Genesis world was a complete process that involved engulfing all of the dimensions, regardless of how powerful or weak they were. Hysteria couldn't give up on these dimensions simply because they were too weak. Otherwise, the process would be incomplete. Ling Han was still cultivating. Before this, he had been fully focused on investigating secrets of the Genesis world, such as the secret codes of life. Thus, he still had yet to fully deduce the 2nd-grade heavenly venerable seals. Since he had spare time now, he decided to sit cross-legged and absorb the comprehensions in his mind. He had already obtained all of the secrets of the Genesis world, so with this as a foundation, deducing the heavenly venerable seals became as easy as could be. In any case, this was simply a process of interacting with the fundamental power of the Genesis world. In just 3 years, Ling Han opened his eyes again, revealing the dense array of symbols within them. He was clearly sitting right there, yet Lin Luo and the others suddenly felt as if he were distant and unreachable. It was as if Ling Han had entered another realm. Wang. With a single thought, 9 streams of symbols appeared on Ling Han's body. These were all of the heavenly venerable seals, from 9th-grade seals all the way to 1st-grade seals. Not a single one was missing. Each seal was resonating with the others, and even though they were releasing energy, they were also absorbing energy at the same time. This was an endless cycle of growth and rejuvenation. This was a perfect cycle, a complete system. Ling Han came to some sort of understanding, and another thought in his mind caused the 9 streams of symbols to fuse together again, transforming into a yin-yang diagram. Yin, yang, life, death, positive, and negative. These things were opposing, yet they were also mutually enabling. Ling Han tore open the void and casually snapped his fingers. Peng! A huge explosion instantly tore through the void, unleashing a petrifying destructive power. This was the result of his power increasing 100,000-fold. By channeling all of the heavenly venerable seals and fusing them together, Ling Han was surprisingly able to increase his power 100,000-fold. Pu. Ling Han immediately spat a mouthful of blood. This power was far too immense, so much so that it placed a huge burden on Ling Han's body. His 6th-tier physique was actually unable to withstand it. Nearby, Lin Luo and the others were all wide-eyed with shock. The destructive power of this attack had been far too terrifying. Even they couldn't help but feel stunned. Would they genuinely be killed if they were struck by such an attack? Perhaps their physical body would remain unharmed, but their mind would most likely be shattered into pieces. Yet, Ling Han was still only at the 6th tier. How did he possess such unfathomable potential? However, it was incredibly difficult for Ling Han to unleash such an attack. After all, his body had yet to become indestructible, so he was still unable to withstand the flow of such immense power. Ling Han, how do you feel? Everyone asked. There was annoyance on Ling Han's face. He hadn't imagined that the problem wasn't his power being insufficient, but instead his physique being too weak to withstand the shock. Fortunately, the dimensions inside him all radiated with powerful life force. In just an instant, his slightly cracked skin had already healed and become as flawless as new. Heavenly venerates were detested by heaven and earth, so it was only natural that they wouldn't be nurtured by heaven and earth. However, the dimensions inside Ling Han were also his cells at the same time. They were a part of him, so why wouldn't they nurture him? Unleashing such an attack indeed put a significant burden on his body. However, as long as it wasn't too frequent, this was a burden that he could withstand. It's time for the final battle, Xin Fu announced. With his sharp sense as a 7th-tier ultimate elite, he could already sense an overwhelming aura charging over and exuding an indescribably powerful might. That was Hysteria, a being that had engulfed almost the entirety of the Genesis world. No one could imagine just how powerful it had become now. Peng! The earth shuddered, and the initially clear sky instantly became pitch black. Thankfully, they were all heavenly venerates, so they could see clearly even in absolute darkness. Countless tentacles descended from the sky, bearing down on the entire celestial realm. Hysteria had come. It wanted to engulf the final dimension and achieve its ultimate aim. This was the celestial realm, the realm where Ling Han had begun his journey. And now, it was going to become the final battleground. This was where everything had begun, and this was where everything would end. Charge! Ling Han and the others all charged forward, directly tearing open the void and leaping out of the dimension. Looking down from the void, they could see an indescribably large octopus reaching out with its countless tentacles and encircling the entire celestial realm. To provide a sense of scale, Hysteria was like a large mountain, while the celestial realm was nothing more than a small blade of grass on the mountain. Ling Han and the others naturally wouldn't stand there idly. They all charged forward and unleashed a barrage of furious attacks at Hysteria, attempting to stop it from engulfing the celestial realm. Huh! Why don't you guys obediently shrink back into your shells like before? Wouldn't that be nice? Extermination said. She appeared before them with Chong Yang and the others. She swept her gaze over them, and she discovered that there were 4 new helpers in Lin Yolian and the others. She couldn't help but smile, and said, "Oh, so you found yourself some new helpers. No wonder you dare to come over to challenge us. However, it's not only you who has new helpers." She turned around and said, "Come on out, Wang." How was it possible to raise someone from the heavenly body tier to the 7th tier heavenly venerable tier in such a short span of time? Moreover, Wang Chuanha's cultivation talent could only be regarded as normal. If he were to cultivate by himself, it would be extremely difficult for him to even become a celestial king, to say nothing of becoming a heavenly venerate, a 7th tier heavenly venerate. Now, however, Wang Chuanha was standing right before them, radiating with the formidable aura of a 7th tier ultimate elite. This was the reality. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,